Hey guys, Greg here, Bone Tactical, introducing the Coup de Grâce, the world's most effective push dagger, and the world's first correctly designed push dagger in line with modern martial arts and self-defense fighting techniques. Most of you probably know what a push dagger is. A push dagger is an exceptionally effective self-defense tool. It's not specifically designed as an offensive weapon because of the shortness of the blade. If I'm not defending myself, if I'm entering into a situation where I have the element of surprise and I'm completely catching someone by surprise and having to use a knife as an attacking tool or assault or whatever you want to call it, I probably wouldn't choose a push dagger, although the liberals and the lawmakers will, of course, tell you that this is such a dangerous knife. And in fact, it could be considered for sure one of the most dangerous knives ever designed or produced, but it wouldn't be my first choice for necessarily an attack because it's much more effectively used as a melee type weapon, and we're talking multiple strikes here. The reason that it's such an effective self-defense tool is because it's so intuitive. I literally just have to grab the knife and my hand can't go on it wrong. And once it's in my hand, it's the strongest connection because a normal knife sticks out the top of the hand. But this knife is designed perfectly in line with the bones of my arm. And when I extend my arm in a punch, it's just incredibly effective. It's like growing claws. You know, you see the Wolverine comics, how the claws come out of here. It's more effective in all across the board for a human being to have that knife sticking straight out like that, specifically in self-defense situations. You know, if I had one in each hand, then it's devastating what this knife can do, and that's why it's considered to be so dangerous, a push dagger. Why is this push dagger in particular the world's most effective? Simply because of the ergonomics, the material chosen, the know-how behind the heat treat and fabrication processing, the actual manufacture of the knife itself, and of course the design, which includes an incredibly effective carry method. So important that a knife starts with a great carry method. This one in particular, you just slip inside the waistband, allows it to be fully concealable. You draw it just like you would draw a concealed firearm. You reach down, you grab it, and you pull it out. It's faster to access than a firearm because you don't have to aim it. You just grab, pull, and stick. Incredibly effective, probably the most effective self-defense edged weapon ever designed or produced, but by far the most effective push dagger. It's because of the ergonomics. As far as carry goes, there's no hot spots for either carry or use. I can hold this in my hand all day long and it just feels great. I can cut with it. If I really even wanted to cut with it, I could use it for opening boxes all day and it would just feel great in my hand. Carrying it as well, it's very small and you don't understand when you look at it that I have really big hands. I wear size XL gloves. I'm 6'3", 260 pounds. I'm a big guy, and this small little knife is absolutely devastating and it feels comfortable in my hand. So people with small hands, it'll feel great with them. People with big hands, it doesn't matter. You don't have to have a certain size hand to use it. That's another reason why it's the world's most effective push dagger. Apart from the carry option, being comfortable to carry. And it's important for you guys that don't have the full understanding of carrying a weapon that if a weapon's not comfortable to carry, you're gonna end up leaving it home and you're not gonna have it when you need it. So I could have it say that, oh, well, I have an AR-15, so I don't need a knife. Well, unless you carry your AR-15 on a sling with you everywhere you go, which I don't recommend because you're gonna get taken as a maniac and you're not gonna have many opportunities in life if you walk around every day with an AR-15, then you don't have your AR-15 everywhere you go, and something like this is an absolute game changer for those people that are gonna have it when they need it. Of course, the science behind the blade, you guys probably understand our hollow grind, recurve blade, and that's because specifically when it's a small blade, when it's short like this, the only way that a small short blade like this is great at slashing is if it has that other point right there, that recurve, which means when I pull through here, I'm not relying on a small curvature like what you see in the front there to cut. I'm also able to use the point right here to cut which means that I'm cutting at a downward angle with this recurve right here, allowing it to push through, not just slashing with this glancing, moving away angle, right? So that allows this tiny little blade to be incredibly more effective than any other knife at the same size for slashing. Of course, stabbing, we use a traditional Japanese tanto style point tip. A long time ago, this American tanto thing came around, and it was because these cheap, junky, machine-made knives couldn't get the angle right for the tanto style, Japanese tanto style, that's the correct style for stabbing and strength retention. This American tanto style came around, and machines were able to pound them out, and they're not a good design by any means. They're the best that they could do with what they had. Now, a true artisan will make a knife with a Japanese tanto style tip, and what that does for you is it gives tip strength, so your tip isn't going to break, but it also allows to have that absolute great stabbing point. So everything about sharpness and strength is a balance. These knives are pretty thick, but they are the correct grind angle and edge geometry to give sharpness and strength. If you go too thick of an edge geometry at any point, whether looking at the blade this way or actual grind of the knife itself in the sharpness of the blade, then if you go too thick, you have a very strong knife that's not sharp as you would want it to be. If you go too thin, then you have a very sharp knife that's not as strong as you would want it to be. And it's very important. This particular steel we're using, L6 Bainite, which is like insanely tough and awesome steel. So I designed this to be able to be used to punch through we're talking about if somebody might have body armor on, like soft armor, Kevlar, stuff like that. This is going through like butter. That's not going to hurt the knife. If I had to punch through a glass window, if I had to punch through thin sheet metal, anything, this is why this knife is so tough, because a big guy or a martial arts professional can generate a lot of strength in a punch. So if I'm generating full strength in a punch, I want a knife that's not going to break on me. And so we have this absolutely incredibly tough steel that's normally reserved for swords and stuff like that, but in this case I'm using it just because of the force that this tiny little knife generates. A lot of force when you got a guy that's getting that hip twist and properly throwing a martial arts punch. Wham! You're talking devastating. This knife is going through hard bone. It's going through anything that's in its path. And that's another reason, this angle right here, most people that are making a push dagger, they make a terrible push dagger from the get-go because they do two things wrong. They do a push dagger that's designed to be used in the middle of the hand, and then what I want to do is I want to line up these first two knuckles with any kind of a punch or impact that I'm throwing with a closed hand. I want to line up these two knuckles all the way down here. And so what happens with this knife, when it's in a middle knuckle, it creates this weakness, and you just lose a lot of strength because the wrist is not angled correctly. When I have the knife perfectly aligned correctly and I'm in here, what that does is it allows me to now have everything lined up correctly, and it's like a jackhammer, okay? There's no weak joints in the equation. Now everything's properly aligned. So a lot of times you'll see a knife that's a push dagger that's either designed to be used in the middle of the hand, which is wrong, and you'll also see one that's designed at the wrong angle. There does need to be a little bit of an angle, okay? And that's because when my hand is straight locked in here at the correct angle and everything is lined up, you draw that line from here and between these first two knuckles down through the bones of the hand, and you get a lot more impact power. Think about if you were to have something that's solid and you use it as a spear or something like that. Let's say that this is the tip of a spear. Now, if you have a solid piece of anything, if it's a wood, that spear is going to be a lot more effective than if you're putting it at the end of something that's weak and with a lot of moving parts in it. Imagine like trying to put a knife or a spear on something like a disposable straw or like the end of a hose and stabbing with it. If you have those weak joints in there, it's just going to create weakness, okay? And that's why this is the most effective, again, because of most people don't consider the martial arts aspect and how the human body works, kinesiology and modern martial arts fighting techniques that go into a push dagger. All right, so the ergonomics, the carry method, the actual use and effectiveness, all that is hands down better than anything on the market. It's what makes it such a great knife. And then we start getting into the material. We're hands down choosing the right material for the job and way ahead of the competition. Handle materials, of course, we've got our proprietary black micarta, and this is what we call the Night Raid version. I make this version specifically because people like black, and a lot of customers were wanting a black version. The Resolute Warrior version is our top of the line, beautiful, the most beautiful, coolest materials, exotic, everything you can get. The handle scales for the Resolute Warrior are wood that I pull out of the jungles of Central America with my expedition vehicle. I've got videos on it here. It sounds crazy, but it's true. Recycled hardwoods. I happened to find this one tree. When this is gone, I'm not gonna have any more of this particular wood. I happened to find this massive fallen granadillo that's a type of granadillo that doesn't even hardly exist anymore. You can't buy it. It's nearly extinct tree. I found one fallen after hurricanes down in Honduras, and the tree was dead and fallen, and I was able to cut it up, and I have a bunch of it that I'm using for these handle scales. Why it's so good is because that's the actual color, okay? That's just beautiful wood, apart from the fact that it's not too hard to where it's brittle, because a really hard wood is gonna be a little bit brittle, susceptible to, when it's in a small handle scale, thin handle scale, which you need to have the right ergonomics, it's gotta be thin. Then with a really hard, like an ironwood, it's gonna be susceptible to splitting or cracking, or either with heat or cold or hard impacts, it can splinter. Now with really light wood like a mahogany, that's gonna hold up really well too. It's not gonna splinter, it's not gonna break, but it's soft enough that you could dent it with a fingernail, and it's gonna get dents and dings in it through time. So the granadillo is like the perfect balance, because it's like a mahogany, it has the properties of mahogany to where it's just a very dense, very fine grain, but it's harder than mahogany, not quite an ironwood. It's about on the scale of hardness, it's very near to American hickory, which is, in America, it's considered to be one of the hardest woods out there. But American hickory is not a beautiful wood, and it doesn't have anywhere near as dense of a grain. It doesn't hold up anything like mahogany, but the granadillo does. So just an absolute work of art as far as the wood goes. The Modern Warrior version that I've been showing here from the beginning is our proprietary jute micarta. We use recycled coffee bags. They used to use, way back in the day, coffee bags to import and export coffee. It's like a burlap, and it's very fibrous natural material. So what it does is the particular resin, epoxy resin that we use, it really soaks it up. So it's just one of the toughest and strongest micartas, just simply because of the material of the micarta. You can have a beautiful micarta like this, but it's not gonna be quite as strong. You're not gonna run into problems with it. The differences we're talking about are like if you hit it with a sledgehammer, you're gonna notice slight differences in the way that it performs. And then the pretty much, other than bone durantium, the strongest handle material that you can get on a knife is gonna be this jute micarta. The bone durantium is a Kevlar and fiberglass reinforced version of a handle scale that it's a material proprietary to Bone Tactical, and it's something that we use in some of our knives. It's not really necessary on a knife this small, and if you want the strongest, toughest version, it's actually also the most affordable. The other versions are beautiful versions, exotic versions, but this Modern Warrior version I specifically make to try and get it into the hands of the guys that need it most. Protectors, first responders, special operations guys, stuff like that, and I try to make it as affordable as possible because I want these knives to be in the right hands. I don't really make much of a profit on these. If you guys can afford a fancy knife, go with one of the fancy versions. If you need something to get the job done, the Modern Warrior is the way to go. Finally, the way that I'm able to produce the world's most effective push dagger is doing everything in-house, 100%. Quality control, attention to detail, making sure that the heat treat's done right, making sure that I can exact the best heat treat standards out of the steel that I'm using. In this particular case, this bayonet is hard to do. It has to be done perfectly in order for it to really get that bayonet of the L6, and it is just incredible steel when you do it right. But You can't do it in big batches. You have to do it one at a time, and you have to get the temperatures and the times, the heating and cooling times and the temperatures exactly right. There's no room for error. That's why nobody else is doing knives like this out of that material, because it's pro quality. And again, this is just the way that I'm able to get you the world's most effective edged weapons, is because of the insane amount of attention to detail of making these one at a time by hand and doing it right. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bone out.